Every nation has a story, but few are as complex, as turbulent, and as defining for the modern world as the story of the United States of America. A story of struggle and triumph, of contradictions and ideals, of conflicts that tore it apart and dreams that held it together. Today, we trace the entire journey, from the first peoples who walked the land to the birth of a republic and beyond. The first chapters, before 1492, long before the name America existed. This vast continent was home to millions of people. Diverse nations flourished here. Powerful confederacies like the Iroquois in the Northeast, the Mississippian mound builders, the intricate civilizations of the Southwest like the Pueblo, and countless others. These societies had languages, trade networks, and spiritual traditions deeply tied to the land. But in 1492, everything began to change. Christopher Columbus's voyage across the Atlantic opened the door to European colonization. The arrival of the Spanish, French, Dutch, and later the English would transform the Americas forever, often violently displacing the indigenous peoples whose ancestors had lived here for thousands of years. Colonies and conflict. By the 1600s, English settlers began establishing permanent colonies along the Atlantic coast. Jamestown, founded in 1607, was the first to survive. Plymouth followed in 1620 with the Pilgrims. Over the next century, 13 colonies grew, each with its own culture and economy. New England's shipping and trade. The South's plantation system built on enslaved African labor, and the middle colonies' mix of farming and commerce. But with growth came conflict. The colonies were tied to Britain, yet increasingly independent in spirit. Taxes, trade restrictions, and political control from across the ocean sparked resentment. Voices for liberty began to rise, most famously expressed in the fiery words of Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty, or give me death." The American Revolution. By 1775, tensions exploded into war. The American Revolution began with the battles of Lexington and Concord. What followed was 8 years of struggle between ragtag colonial militias and a mighty British Empire. In 1776, the Continental Congress issued the Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson. Its words, "All men are created equal," would echo through history, even though they excluded women, indigenous peoples, and enslaved Africans at the time. Against all odds, the colonies prevailed. With French support and General George Washington's leadership, the United States of America was officially born in 1783. Yet winning independence was only the beginning. Building a nation, the young republic faced enormous challenges. How would it govern itself? After the weak Articles of Confederation failed, the Founding Fathers drafted the U.S. Constitution in 1787. It established a federal government with checks and balances, a system still in place today. In 1789, George Washington became the first president. Under his leadership, and later that of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, the nation began to find its footing. But unity was fragile. Political factions quickly emerged, Federalists versus Democratic Republicans, setting the stage for a political culture of rivalry and debate. Expansion and contradiction. The 1800s ushered in rapid growth. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the nation's size. Pioneers pushed westward, driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that America was destined to expand across the continent. But this expansion came at a great cost. Native American nations were forced from their lands, most notoriously through the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. At the same time, slavery expanded in the South. Even as abolitionist movements gained strength in the North, America was becoming more powerful, but also more divided. The Civil War. By the mid-19th century, the question of slavery threatened to tear the country apart. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, pledging to halt the spread of slavery. Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederacy. The Civil War that followed from 1861 to 1865 was the deadliest conflict in American history. Brother fought brother. Entire cities were destroyed. But the Union's victory preserved the nation and led to the abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment. Lincoln called it a new birth of freedom. Yet his assassination in 1865 left the country struggling to rebuild. Reconstruction and transformation. Reconstruction attempted to reunite North and South while granting rights to freed African Americans. For a time, black men voted and held office. But white resistance and violent groups like the Ku Klux Klan pushed back fiercely. By the late 1870s, Reconstruction collapsed, and Jim Crow segregation took hold, denying equality for generations. Meanwhile, America industrialized at lightning speed. Railroads stretched coast to coast, cities swelled, and immigrants arrived by the millions. By the turn of the 20th century, the United States was emerging as a global power. The United States was no longer a fragile experiment. It was a growing giant. But the 20th century would test it like never before. 2 world wars, a Great Depression, struggles for civil rights, and a role on the global stage that would shape the modern world. To understand America today, we must follow the next half of its journey. The United States was no longer a fragile experiment. It was a growing giant. But the 20th century would test it like never before. This next chapter is the story of war and peace, division and unity, setbacks and progress. And it is the story that brings America closer to the nation we know today. The world at war. At the dawn of the 20th century, the United States flexed its muscles on the global stage. After victory in the Spanish-American War of 1898, it gained territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. For the first time, America was an empire. Then came World War I. Though hesitant at first, the U.S. entered in 1917, tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. When the war ended in 1918, President Woodrow Wilson pushed for his vision of a League of Nations. But at home, Americans wanted to retreat into isolation. The 1920s roared with jazz, booming industry, and cultural change. But prosperity hit deep cracks in the system, cracks that shattered with the stock market crash of 1929. The Great Depression. The 1930s brought breadlines, unemployment, and despair. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans was out of work. Farms collapsed, banks failed, and hope seemed scarce. President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded with the New Deal, massive government programs to create jobs, regulate banks, and provide a safety net for the vulnerable. These changes expanded the role of the federal government in everyday life. But even as America struggled at home, storm clouds gathered abroad. Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan set the stage for the deadliest conflict in history. World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 thrust the U.S. into World War II. It became a total war effort. Men and women joined the armed forces. Factories shifted to weapons production, and millions contributed to victory. From the beaches of Normandy to the Pacific Islands, American forces fought with determination. By 1945, the Axis powers were defeated, but victory came with heavy costs. The Holocaust revealed horrors beyond comprehension, and the war ended with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ushering in the nuclear age. The United States emerged from WWII as one of 2 superpowers, alongside the Soviet Union. A new struggle began, the Cold War. The Cold War era. The Cold War wasn't fought on a single battlefield, but across the globe in ideology, in technology, and in politics. America championed democracy and capitalism, while the Soviet Union pushed communism. The 1950s saw the Korean War, the arms race, and the fear of nuclear annihilation. At home, McCarthyism fueled suspicion, and civil rights activists began challenging the deep injustices of segregation. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy declared America would land a man on the moon before the decade ended. By 1969, Neil Armstrong's one small step fulfilled that promise, a symbol of innovation and possibility. But the 1960s also brought turmoil. The Vietnam War divided the nation, sparking massive protests. The Civil Rights Movement, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, pushed the U.S. closer to living up to its founding ideals. Landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965 struck down legal segregation, though the struggle for equality was far from over. Challenges and change. By the 1970s, America faced a crisis of confidence. The Vietnam War ended in withdrawal. The Watergate scandal forced President Richard Nixon to resign, shaking faith in government. Yet the country adapted. The late 20th century brought economic shifts, from manufacturing to technology and finance. The Cold War finally ended in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower. The 1990s seemed like a moment of triumph. The economy boomed, the internet revolution began, and American culture, from movies to music, spread across the globe. But the new century would bring new trials. 9/11 and the War on Terror. On September 11, 2001, America was shaken to its core. Terrorist attacks destroyed the World Trade Center, struck the Pentagon, and killed nearly 3,000 people. In response, President George W. Bush launched the War on Terror, leading to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. These conflicts would shape global politics for decades, raising debates about security, freedom, and America's role in the world. The 21st century struggle. The 2008 financial crisis reminded Americans of the fragility of prosperity. Millions lost jobs and homes. Barack Obama's election as the first African-American president in 2008 symbolized progress, yet political polarization deepened. The 2010s saw debates over immigration, healthcare, climate change, and growing inequality. Social movements like Black Lives Matter and #MeToo highlighted ongoing struggles for justice and equality. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic tested the nation's resilience. Lockdowns, mass casualties, and economic disruption marked one of the most challenging moments in recent memory. America today. Today, the United States stands as a paradox, a global superpower grappling with its own divisions. It remains a land of innovation, diversity, and opportunity, yet also one of inequality, debate, and struggle over what its future should be. The story of America is unfinished. It is the story of ideals tested by reality, of contradictions yet to be resolved, of people still striving to build a more perfect union. From the first peoples to the birth of a republic, from civil war to world wars, from moon landings to modern struggles. The history of the United States is not just the story of a nation, but of an idea that freedom, democracy, and equality are worth striving for, even when imperfect. If you enjoyed this journey, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an adventure into history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.